for today's video, let us dive into the evolution of the Philippine Constitution. But first, let us define first what does a constitution mean. So when we say constitution, it is a set of rules that guides how a country, a state, or even other political organization works. So basically, it's like a rule book. It got the branches of the government, the power of the government, the responsibility, and most importantly, the rights of the people. So when we say constitution, it is a supreme law of the land. But bear in mind that no one, not even the president, can go against the constitution.
Did you know that the Biak na Bato was the first constitution in the Philippines? It was signed by General Emilio Aguinaldo and Spanish Governor General Primo de Rivera in San Miguel, Bulacan, in the house of Pablo Texon, para makamit ang kalayaan. Biak na Bato is borrowed from Cuba by Isabelo Artaco and Felix Ferrer in Spanish and later on translated into Tagalog.
The Biak na Bato Constitution provided establishment of a Supreme Council that would serve as the highest governing body of the Republic. It also outlines certain basic human rights such as freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and the right to education. Emilio Aguinaldo and Mariano Trias were elected Supreme Council President and Vice President respectively. This constitution is based on Cuban Constitution and was drafted by Felix Ferrer and Isabelo Artacho.
The Malolos Constitution is the inaugural formal constitution of the Philippines. It was established in 1899 under General Emilio Aguinaldo's revolutionary government. This historic document, crafted by a revolutionary Congress, proclaimed Aguinaldo as the new president of the First Philippine Republic, making the Philippines the first democratic country in Asia and the West Pacific. The Constitution instructed the government with separate branches: an executive led by a president, a legislature headed by a prime minister and provincial representatives, and a judiciary overseen by the President of the Supreme Court, embodying democratic principles of governance.
However, the course of the First Philippine Republic was altered by the cession of the Philippines to the United States through the Treaty of Peace on December 10, 1898. Aguinaldo's capture during the Spanish-American War in 1901, the subsequent annexation of the Philippines by the U.S. to the Constitution discontinuation. As American military rule was established on April 14, 1898, despite its brief, the Malolos Constitution legacy endures, showcasing the pivotal role of organic laws in shaping a nation's governance and identity.
The Philippine Organic Act of 1902 was a basic law for the insular government that was enacted by the United States on July 1, 1902. It is also known as the Philippine Bill of 1902 or the Cooper Act after its author Helen Allen Cooper. The bill proposed the creation and administration of a civil government in the Philippines.
It was signed into law by President Theodore Roosevelt on July 2, 1902. The approval of the act coincided with the official end of Philippine-American War. The Philippine Bill of 1902 contained provisions for, among many other things, the open and free exploration, occupation and purchase of mineral deposits, and the land where they may be found.
The law established a parliamentary system composed of a Senate and House of Representatives, both of which were chosen by the people. It also established a Supreme Court and allowed Filipinos to elect their own Governor-General. John's Law allowed for greater Filipino involvement in the government and paved the way for eventual independence. It was seen a significant step towards self-governance for the Philippines, which was previously under colonial rule. The law remained in effect until the Philippines gained full independence in 1946.
So in this constitution, we will talk about the Tidings-McDuffie Act, also known as the Philippine Commonwealth and Independence Act. It was signed by the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt on March 24, 1934, with the aim of granting independence after a 10-year transitory period under a Commonwealth government. However, Filipinos are classified as American nationals, depriving them of certain rights and benefits, including those for veterans.
This inequality persisted throughout the transitory period, but the act ultimately paved the way for the Philippines to gain independence 1946, ending this phase complex.
After the Spanish rule, the Americans came to the Philippines. The Filipinos were now colonized for the second time. Eventually, an American Constitution was made. This is now what we call the 1935 Constitution. Now, here are the salient features of the 1935 Constitution. First, it has a bicameral legislature. When we say bicameral, it has two legislators composed of a Senate and a House of Representatives.
Second, the president were elected to a 4-year term together with the vice president without re-election, as well as the creation of independent electoral commission. Third, it introduced the right of suffrage or the right to vote by male citizens of the Philippines who were 21 years old and over, and the ones who are unable to read and write. Luckily, this right was extended to female as well.
The 1935 Philippine Constitution. This constitution was praised for its brevity and clarity, but was criticized for being pro-Americans. One of its provisions is the Party Amendment, which was approved in March 11, 1947, which allowed the Americans the equal rights for its exploitation in the Philippines' natural resources and the operation of public utilities. Ferdinand Marcos became the President of the Philippines on December 13, 1965 and was re-elected in 1969 and maneuvered the 1971 Constitutional Convention so he could continue in the office. He then declared the martial law due to the rising number of the demonstrations, the communist threat posed by the Communist Party of the Philippines, and the rebellions of MIM or the Mindanao Independence Movement.
The Philippine Constitution evolved once again and leading us to one of the most prominent constitution era of the Philippines and making it to the 1973 Constitution or the Constitutional Authoritarianism or also known as the Marcos Constitution. Ano nga ba ang nilalaman ng saligang batas na ito? On January 17, 1973, President Marcos issued Proclamation No. 1102 and announced that the Constitution of 1973 had been ratified by the overwhelming majority of the people and thus became affected the Constitution of the Philippines. The method of ratified was viva voce plebiscite or show of hands. They arranged citizens' assemblies of groups of people in various barangays, voting age reduced to 15 years to ratify by show of hands.
The so-called Marcos Constitution differs from the previous constitution in many ways. During his lifetime, the Constitution was amended 4 times in 1976, 1980, 1981, and 1984, making it way different from its original form in 1973. The fate of the nation under the 1973 Constitution was brought shaky under the imperial presidency of Marcos, who fell out of power after that famous EDSA revolution of 1986. The Marcoses flee in Hawaii through an asylum, then Corazon Aquino was installed as the new president of the Philippines.
The 1987 Philippine Constitution, also known as the Anti-Marcos Constitution, is the latest iteration of the Philippines Constitution. It is a document that protects and defines the rights of citizens, establishes how the government should work, and outlines how laws are made in order to protect those rights.
Now, the 1987 Philippine Constitution revolves around 4 themes. First is the upholding of national sovereignty. Second is the democratic governance and prevention of another dictatorship. And third, the respect for human rights and civil liberties. And lastly, fourth, promotion of the social justice. It is not a perfect document, but it's the country's highest law, binding all the citizens of the Philippines.
The Constitution is provided for 3 governmental powers, namely, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. The executive branch leads the legislative branch since it is divided into 2 houses, while the judicial branch settles disputes between the 2 houses of the legislative branch. In addition, the legislative branch makes the laws, while the executive branch enforces the laws and the judicial branch interprets the laws. But remember that the government will not operate without its people.
The powers of these 3 branches are separated from one another. This is what we call the separation of powers.
It also has a system of check and balances. In this system, each branch has the power of check to sustain as to stop the actions by the other projects. This is to prevent any one of them from becoming too powerful. The 1987 Philippine Constitution's preamble reflects the aspiration of the Filipino people to build a just and humane society, promote the common good, and secure blessing of independence and democracy under the rule of law and the regime of truth, justice, freedom, love, equality, and peace.